guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and we're going to be doing a Commander deck tech. This is one on Nine-Fingers Keene, and I do actually have her on paper. Can't wait to share it with her. Without further ado, let's go through Nine-Fingers. So, Nine-Fingers Keene is for 1 black, green and a blue. You get a legendary 4/4 human rogue with Menace, Ward, pay 9 life. Whenever Nine-Fingers Keene deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 9 cards of your library. You may put a gate from among them onto the battlefield. Then, if you control 9 or more gates, put the rest into your hand. Otherwise, put the rest at the bottom of your library. So Nine-Fingers already has that inbuilt menace, so she's already a little bit evasive, but with that ward, meaning pay 9 life, meaning all single targeted removal on her, the opponent's really got to think about it. Then, as you're smashing face with Nine-Fingers, you're looking at the top cards of your library, and if you do control those gates, which we have more than enough ramp in the deck to get, then you put all those into your hands, and we also have a little secret win con with it. So first up we have Evasion. So we've got Prowler's Helm, Trailblazer's Boots and Varrock Battlehorns. These 3 equipments can really help push her through. Prowler's Helm, making equipped creature can't be blocked except by walls. This is pretty much everything. Trailblazer's Boots is equipped creature has non-basic land walk, which will get through almost any deck that is playing more than 3 colours or 3 or more. Varrock Battlehorn says equipped creature has trample and can't be blocked except by more than 1 creature, which actually makes Nine-Fingers unblockable, as that menace really pushes her further through. Next we've got the Whisper Silk Cloak and the Mask of Grizzlebrand. Whisper Silk Cloak, pretty big staple, gives an equipped creature unblockable, and Shroud, which does turn off that ward ability. However, that unblockable is really what we want, getting those through. Mask of Grizzlebrand, which is a legendary equipment, which is equipped creature has flying and lifelink, and whenever equipped creature dies, you may pay X life, where X is its power. If you do, draw X cards. So this flying and lifelink really gets you through and can help stabilize you later in the game, as well as if they do find a way on dealing with Nine-Fingers, which sometimes can happen with a board wipe, then you're drawing those cards, getting back more card advantage. Next we have Alpha Authority in Aqueous forms as our 2 enchantment auras in the deck. Alpha Authority gives equipped creature hexproof and can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. Again, this is giving Nine-Fingers that unblockable, which is what we're after. And Aqueous form is the same thing. Equipped creature cannot be blocked, and whenever a creature attacks, scry 1. So you're getting in those little scries here and there, which can help you decide what you're going to play next. Alright, so up next we have our Destruction spell. So what are we going to do to answer your opponent's stuff? Well, we're going to be casting stuff like Beast Within, Curse of Swine, and Putrefy. Beast Within destroys target permanent, and its controller gets a 3/3 beast. It's a lot easier to deal with a creature than maybe that Gaia's Cradle or whatever your opponent has played. Curse of Swine says exile X target creatures. For each creature exiled this way, its controller creates a 2/2 boar. Again, 2/2 boars could be a lot better than dealing with that Emrakul or whatever big scary creature your opponent has decided to play. And we've also got Putrefy. Destroy target artifact or creature, it can't be regenerated. Again, answering any of those Panharmonicons, very important in this deck. Then we've also got cards like Assassin's Trophy, Maelstrom Pulse and Crux of Fate. Assassin's Trophy, destroying target permanent and opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield. Again, really answering any of those nasty permanents your opponent may be putting out and just giving them a basic land. That is a bit of a trade-off, but for 2 mana, it's pretty good. Maelstrom Pulse says destroy target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. If you play your Curse of Swine and your opponent, you exile a heap of creatures, make a heap of 2/2 boars, then kill one of those with this Maelstrom Pulse, you essentially have wiped the board. And Crux of Fate, says choose one, destroy all dragon creatures and destroy all non-dragon creatures. Unfortunately this will hit our commander, but if you're in a state where you need to answer the whole board, this is really good. Hits almost everything or just screws over that one dragon player. Alright, so now we're starting ourselves off with some ramp, because ramp's the best thing in this deck. You want to be hitting your lands, making sure everything's all good. First of all, we've got Kendama's Reach, Rampant Growth, and Circuitous Roots. Kendama's Reach gets 2 basics, puts 1 into hand, 1 onto the battlefield tapped. Rampant Growth, you put 1 straight onto the battlefield tapped, and Circuitous Roots, you get 2 basic lands and or gates, which in our case will be gates, and go onto the battlefield tapped. We're also running Cultivate, Sylvan Scrying, and Tempt with Discovery. Cultivate, again, same as Kendama's Reach, 1 into 2 basic lands, 1 into hand tapped, so 1 into hand and the other into the battlefield tapped. Sylvan Scrying is you get any land and put it into your hand, and this means we're getting one of our gates, and more often than not it's either Boulders or Gond Gate, which we'll get into later. Tempt with Discovery has this tempting offer. This is perfect in Commander for what we want to do. We're going to look at our opponents, go, hey, you guys want to draw land, you guys want to make sure you're hitting your land drops, and we're going to get 1 land for each opponent who puts a land onto the battlefield this way. We're also running Open the Gates, Gape Creeper Vine, and Elvish Rejuvenator. Open the Gates says search your library for a basic land or gate. Funnily enough, we're going to pick gate, reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Gape Creeper Vine is a 0/2 with Defender, but when he enters the battlefield, we can get a gate into our hand. An Elvish Rejuvenator is a 1/1 Elf Druid, and when he enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. This is definitely going to be another one of our gates. We then have District Guide, Expedition Map, and Crop Rotation. District Guide, when he enters the battlefield, we get a land or a basic land or gate and put it into our hand. Expedition Map, we can pay 2, tap and sack it, search our library for a land, reveal it and put it into our hand and then shuffle. And Crop Rotation, as an additional cost to cast a spell, we may sacrifice the land, and if we do, and when we do, we then get to search our library for a land and put it onto the battlefield, so we can get rid of one of those pesky little forests or islands, and we can actually get one of our more powerful gates. We're also running Explore the Underdark, Hour of Promise, and Navigation Orb. Explore the Underdark says search your library for up to 2 basic lands and or gates, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then you also take the initiative. We're running Hour of Promise, which says search your library for 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Then if you control 3 or more deserts, create 2/2 black zombies. We're not actually running any deserts in this deck, so realistically it's a 5 mana, go get 2 gates into play. Navigation Orb is 2, tap and sack it, search your library for up to 2 basic lands and or gates, reveal those cards and put them onto the battlefield. Put 1 onto the battlefield and the other into your hand. This is essentially a worse Cultivate at about 5 mana total. However, we are able to get those gates and not necessarily just lands. And once we've got all these lands in our hands, we want to play them with Sakura Tribe Scout, Llanowar Scout, and Scaled Herbalist. These essentially all do the exact same thing. You may tap them, put a land from your hand into play. We are also running Growth Spiral, Explore, and Azusa Lost But Seeking. Growth Spiral is an instant which says draw a card. You may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Note that this does not say tap, so if we're running so we can have basic lands that come into play untapped to possibly surprise our opponents. Explore, you may play an additional land this turn and then draw a card, but it is at sorcery speed. Azusa Lost But Seeking is a 1/2 human monk, saying you may play 2 additional lands on each of your turns. This is great on turn 3 where we can just ramp out like crazy. We have Dryad of Elysian Grove, Ubermold Hydra, and our Kalos Lagoon Mystic. Dryad of the Elysian Grove is a 2/4 nymph, saying you may play an additional land on each of your turns, and lands you control are every basic land in addition to their other types. Ubermold Hydra is a star Hydra with reach, with a power and toughness equal to the number of lands we control, which is generally a lot. And whenever he enters the battlefield, you may get a land from your library onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So he's at least going to be a 1/1, but for 6 mana, he's probably a 7/7 minimum. We then also have a Kalos Lagoon Mystic. So as long as he is tapped, other permanents enter the battlefield tapped, and as long as he's untapped, other permanents enter the battlefield untapped. Because late gates normally enter the battlefield tapped, we want to make sure that they're going to be untapped all the time. So our Chaos makes the cut. So now that Ramp's out of the way, let's talk about some of our payoffs. First, we've got the good old gate combo, Glaive of the Guild Pact, Gatebreaker Ram, and Gate Colossus. Glaive of the Guild Pact is an equipment which says equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each gate you control and has vigilance and menace. And that vigilance does pay off because we can equip it to any of our creatures. Gatebreaker Ram gets +1/+1 for each gate we control, and as long as we control 2 or more gates, Gatebreaker Ram has vigilance and trample. More often than not, when you're playing this, it comes out as a 5/5 at least. I've had one come out as a 7/7 just on turn 4 or something. Gate Colossus costs 1 less for each gate you control and can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, you may put Gate Colossus from your graveyard on top of your library. So this could be an 8/8 beta that can't be blocked by power 2 or less, and can help you push your damage, especially if you equipped it with the Glaive, but as well as it's constantly coming back. It's very difficult to keep down. Next we have the good old landfall token generators of Scoot Swarm, Rampaging Baloth, and Avenger of Zendikar. Scoot Swarm says is a 1/1 insect that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect. If you control 6 or more lands, instead create a copy of Scoot Swarm. Every time I've played this, Scoot Swarm has started as a simple one-of and ended up as 400. There is no if, buts, or hows, especially when you start dropping multiple lands a turn like we just covered. Rampaging Baloth is a 6/6 beast with trample, but whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may also create a 4/4 beast, so it constantly is bringing friends. The Avenger of Zendikar is expensive as a 7-drop, but when he enters the battlefield you create a 0/1 green plant for each land you control. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you put a 1/1 counter on each plant you control. So again, you're constantly making landfalls, so you're constantly getting these plants to be bigger and bigger. Next we have Royal Elemental and Kadama of the East Tree. Royal Elemental is a 2/3 with 3/2 with flying, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may have gain control of target creature for as long as you control Royal Elemental. So again, if we're making 3 or 4 land drops per turn, we're stealing 3 or 4 creatures each turn. And Kadama of the East Tree is a 6/6 with reach, and whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with this ability, you may put a permanent with equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. This is great. So even if all you're doing is putting a land onto the battlefield, it is still a permanent. So that means that you can then put another land onto the battlefield because it's CMC 0. So that just further ramps you ahead. Next we have Field of Dead and Nissa Vital Force. Field of the Dead does enter the battlefield taps for a colorless, but whenever it or another land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Again, because we're running gates and our gates are our main source of mana, we constantly have 7 different lands. And finally we have Nissa Vital Force. Her plus ability is untap target land you control. Until your next turn, it is a 5/5 elemental. With haste, it is still a land. At -3, we return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand, and at -6, you get an emblem. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So this is great in the deck, and adding extra mana with your lands is always good. Having that graveyard recursion is great, and then if you do get the emblem, just constant card draw. And speaking of card draw, we're running some land-based draw effects such as Asi, Tyrant of Gaia Strait, Tatiova Benefic Druid, and Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. AC says There's a 5/5 Serpent, which says you may play an additional land on each of your turn, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. Tatyova has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life and draw a card. She is a 3/3 Merfolk Druid. However, her ability is a forced ability, unlike AC, so it may come to bite us. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. When he enters, is a 6/6 giant, and you must sacrifice him when he enters the battlefield unless he has escaped. When he enters the battlefield or attacks, you gain 3 life and draw a card. Then you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield, and his escape is only blue, blue, green, green, with exiling 5 other cards from your graveyard. Generally, Uro can come down pretty early and stay down, and if he stays down and keeps attacking, you're just going to keep drawing those cards, keep gaining life, and keep playing more lands. Next we have Guild Summit with Yarok the Desecrated and Oracle of Moldire. Guild Summit is an enchantment, which when it enters the battlefield, you may tap any number of untapped gates you control and draw a card for each gate tapped this way. We're really banking on the second ability, which is whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. Yarok is a 3/5 elemental horror with Death Touch and Lifelink, and if a permanent entering the battlefield causes an ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. I wonder what we want to double trigger. Everything. Oracle of Moldire is a 2/2 Elf Shaman, which you may play an additional land on each of your turn, but you play with the top card of your library revealed. However, you may play lands from the top of your library. It's not necessarily drawing card advantage, however, having an extending your hand by 1 more card does count. Then we have Fire Shrieker and Gateway Sneak. These are good ways on when you're dealing combat damage to actually draw more cards, particularly with our commander. With Fire Shrieker equipped to it, it has double strike, meaning you get its ability twice. Looking at the top 18 cards and probably putting all of those cards in your hand is pretty damn good. And we also have Gateway Sneak, which is a 1/3 Vidalcan Rogue. And whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, Gateway Sneak can't be blocked this turn. Whenever it deals damage to a player, you draw a card. We have Ramnakat Excavator and Muldrotha the Gravetide, just in case we're wanting to discard any of our lands. It's allowing us to play them from the graveyard. With Ramnakat Excavator having that exact ability, there's a 2/3 Naga Cleric. Muldrotha takes it one step further and lets us play permanent of each type, meaning a land, Nissa our Planeswalker, as well as a creature, even an enchantment, all on one body. Now that's value. Alright, now we're getting into our big spells. So we're running Scape Shift, Naive's Intervention and Genesis Wave. Scape Shift says sacrifice any number of lands, search your library for up to that many land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This means we can get rid of all the forests or swamps that we've accumulated along the way, and then just bring out a ton of gates in one hit, triggering all those landfalls all over again and getting all that value. Naive's Intervention is for X and green. Choose one, search your library for up to X land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. Or Naive's Intervention deals twice X damage to each creature with flying. Generally, we're going to pick the first mode and go get as many gates out of our library as we can. Finally, we have Genesis Wave. Reveal the top X cards of your library. You may put any number of permanent cards with a converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Then put all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield into your graveyard. Generally, we're going to be hitting everything. If we put at least 7 into this, we're going to get our top end as well as everything, all the lands in between, and just absolutely devastate people in a single turn. Then we're running Torment of Hailfire and Villainous Well. Torment of Hailfire is X black. Repeat the following process X time. Each opponent loses 3 life unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. This can be devastating to the whole table. Finally, we have Villainous Well, X black, green, blue. target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library, you may cast any number of spells with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana cost. Getting to play your opponent's deck, particularly if you're pumping 10-15 mana into this, can be detrimental to them, because that way you can hit infinite combos out of them, or you could just completely drain their deck of value. It could also be a secret mill plan, possibly, having them exile the top cards of their library, especially if they're already running low, and then they draw out of an empty library. Then we're running every single gate we possibly can. The big key hitters are Baldur's Gate, which has tap, add colorless, or 2 and tap, add X mana of any one color where X is the number of gates you control, and Gond Gate, which taps for a colorless and has tap, add 1 of any color of a gate you could produce. But it also has the ability of letting gates you control enter the battlefield untapped. We also have Basilisk Gate, which has tap, add colorless, or 2 and tap. Target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of gates you control. Activate only as a sorcery. It is unfortunately only a sorcery, which means we can't use it as a combat trick. But if we do find a way of copying this with Vesuva or Thespian Stage, we can get more pumps onto our commander and possibly kill people with commander damage. Speaking of which, we are running Vesuva and Thespian Stage as possible gates. Vesuva says you may have Vesuva enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any land on the battlefield. This is great for us because we can have it as a copy of Gond Gate, Basilisk Gate, any one of our gates, except we must remember that Baldur's Gate is a legendary gate and will have the legendary rule. Then we have Thespian Stage, tap, add colorless, 2 and tap. Thespian Stage becomes a copy of target land, except it has this ability, same as Vesuva. And now we have Maze's End, which is our Oops, I Win button. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. You can pay 3, tap, return it to its owner hand, search your library for a gate card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. If you control 10 or more gates with different names, you win the game. It's pretty easy for us to hit those 10 gates with different names, so we can win this fairly often. And finally, we're running 11 forests, 7 islands, and 4 swamps in this deck, just to make sure we're rounding out our curve and hitting all those big green spells that we have, because green is our main colour. And that wraps it up for Nine-Fingers Keene. If you would like me to do a deck tech on a different commander, please let me know down in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.